Hi guys, Jordan with Motion Array, and today we're looking at 3 common filming mistakes and how to avoid them. So let's jump into it. As filmmakers, content creators, or whatever you would consider yourself, this is one of the tools that's really going to be working to bring your creative vision to life. So you're going to need to know how to use it, and more specifically, some common mistakes to avoid. Because if you're making videos as a part of your career, you're probably going to want them to look more like this and less like this. So we're going to be going over 3 of these common mistakes and how to avoid them. And we're going to try to make sure that we're going over topics that chances are you haven't seen on these sorts of video lists before. So let's jump right into it with number 1, jittery handheld. When I say the word handheld, there's a couple films in specific that come to mind, and they all seem to star Matt Damon. It's important to know that not all handheld shots are created equal. You might think that a handheld shot is just a shot where the camera is held in your hand instead of on a tripod or a stabilizer or whatever. This is kind of true, but it's missing a really big key element, and that's the weight of your camera. Yeah, believe it or not, having a heavier camera will actually help you to produce better quality handheld results. And the reason all comes down to something called jitter. It's totally a really technical term that's used all the time in Hollywood, but really when I say jitter, it means this. It's when your shot isn't just moving around, but it's almost like it's so unstable, it's going all over the place. There's almost the presence of micro vibrations rather than a person moving it around. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you were to take a really heavy camera and move it around handheld, it's going to take a lot more force to move it in each direction. But if you have a really light camera, it's going to be really easy to just wiggle it all around and be chaotic. So how do you actually fix this? Well, short of going out and buying a bigger, heavier camera, you can find a way to weigh it down. If you don't want to shell out the money for a camera cage or a shoulder rig, you can just attach your camera to a tripod instead. Hold one hand on one of the legs and one hand on the camera to help stabilize it a little bit. This helps you to get rid of those light jitters while at the same time retaining that really true handheld feel. Number 2, zooming versus pushing. So basically, if you've got a character and you want the camera to frame them tighter over the course of an entire scene, you have a couple of different options. If you've got a zoom lens, you can zoom in at whatever speed you need until you've got them framed however you want. But you've also got the option of physically moving the camera closer to them by actually moving the camera through 3D space. This second method is called a push if you're going closer to the character, and it's called a pull if you're getting farther away from them. And there's a general rule in filmmaking that some people might be unaware of, and that's to never zoom. Okay, we're done. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's not really that simple. The basic premise can all come down to this idea that pushing your camera through 3D space will make it feel a little bit more cinematic, while zooming will make your audience feel a little bit more uneasy. And there's a bunch of different reasons why people think these 2 ways of shooting affect our brains differently, but I'm gonna do my best job to try and convince you why I think that is. I think it's because zooming doesn't feel natural. There's been a lot of times when major Hollywood films have chosen to go for the zoom instead of a push. But those times, as you look deeper, seem to be more about creating a feeling of uneasiness rather than creating a pleasing looking shot. Maybe your character is being spied on, or maybe something supernatural is happening. This example from The Shining is one where, no spoilers, we learn some information that's going to make us feel uneasy. It's not surprising then to think that the director of this film, Stanley Kubrick, is known for his films giving that sense of uneasiness. Clockwork Orange, The Shining, 2001: Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut. Ugh. So what about the other side then? Why would moving your camera through 3D space look more cinematic and not fill your audience with as much uneasiness as zooming? Well, a lot of people think that it's because moving your camera through 3D space gives additional perspective to your audience. Even if it's just subconscious, moving your camera through 3D space is actually giving more information about the world that your characters are in. As you move through 3D space, you're able to pick up on even slightly differing variations on perspective of the subject, inanimate objects, the environment as a whole, etc. It's a great way of giving your audience a more cohesive understanding of the world that they're in, while at the same time giving them a little bit more of a sense of control over their location. So here's my personal rule. Always opt to push your camera physically through 3D space instead of zooming, unless you've got a really specific and stylistic goal that you can really defend with a good reason. The truth is, unless you're working with narrative story content, 99% of us are making videos for fun, for commercial use, for businesses, or for some other reason that's not a full cinematic feature film. And the farther away you can stay from techniques that are associated with cheap camcorders and cheesy sitcoms, the more likely it is that people will see your work as high quality and professional. Number 3, roll longer than you think. If you're watching this video, chances are you're planning to be behind the camera for one of your upcoming shoots. And if you're not planning to edit the footage yourself, guess what? Somebody else probably is. So there's a couple things that you should keep in mind that will really help them out. And one of the biggest things is to make sure that you have buffer room on both sides of a take. There's this notion as you're capturing footage that you're pretty sure you know where it's gonna start and end in the editing. And on sets with an established director and chain of command, you've got somebody whose job it is to yell out cut and decide where to end that take on set. And cut! Cut! And cut! But if you're doing more run and gun solo style work, you're gonna need to make those decisions yourself. And it's not abnormal for people to want to start when they think the take is going to start, and to end as soon as you feel like, yeah, I got the shot. But here's the thing, once you get the footage to the editing room, you see everything in a whole new light. If the tone or the pacing of the film changes over time, then you might want to draw it out and make things a little bit slower during that scene. And that's impossible unless you have more footage to work with. Let's say, for example, that I'm trying to get some B-roll, and I get the urge to stop my recording. Hold it for even longer. Simple as that. But why is this so important? From a technical perspective, having extra room before and after your shot gives you what are called handles on either side of your footage. The good stuff that you're planning to actually use in your final edit is that chunk in the middle, and on either side of the edges is what are called the handles. Let's say you were planning on doing a hard cut from one scene to another, so you shot with that in mind. But in editing, you played around a little bit and you realized that you might actually want to dissolve from one to the other. But you cut the shot as soon as it completed what was scripted to be done. And so now the dissolve that you want to add cuts into the moment that you actually want to see. But if you leave a handle at the end of your video, just a couple seconds after the really good part that you wanted to see, then the dissolve can now happen after that part that you liked and can easily fade into the next scene. Or if you wanted the audio from the next scene to come in early, known as a J-cut, then you're limited to when it can actually happen because you can't stretch out this part of the shot any longer. Having a little bit of footage at the end of your shot gives you that ability. Even if you never end up using those extra couple of seconds, it's way better to have a little bit of excess footage than to desperately want to do something and not be physically able to. So you can see that from a technical perspective, this is really important. But from a creative/story-driven perspective, it's equally, if not more important. My favorite example is from the final scene of The Graduate from 1967. Huge spoiler warning! If you don't want to know how this movie ends, then this is your opportunity to click away, preferably to this time code. And with that out of the way, let's get back to it in 3, 2, 1. After breaking up a wedding mid-ceremony, the two rogue lovebirds jump into a bus to frugally be whisked away into the sunset. It was a moment that was supposed to end pretty quickly, holding hands and laughing about following true love's bliss. But the person designated to yell cut inside the bus totally forgot. So the two actors still in character progressed over the course of about 60 seconds from jubilation, to happiness, to normalcy, to uncertainty, and then ultimately to a tone that feels like they were saying, "What in the world did we just do?" That one small mistake led to one of the most memorable and praised scenes in movie history. And it just goes to show that you never know just what you're gonna get from holding a shot a little bit longer. It may cost you a few extra gigabytes of storage space along the way, but chances are you'll be way happier taking a moment and letting the scene come to a natural conclusion on its own, rather than artificially cutting it off before you even get to see what happens next. And guys, those have been 3 common filming mistakes and how to avoid them. I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, as always, we've got tons of free tutorials over at motionarray.com. And for those of you here on YouTube, if you liked the video, give it a like, consider subscribing, and click the bell icon so that you never miss when we post. And we've got a special offer for you guys just here on YouTube, 20% off your first month subscription over at motionarray.com. Just make sure to click the link in the description below. And I can't wait to see you in the next video.